Welcome to East Coast DNA. We are a East Coast music news podcast. We're a couple of blue-nosed brothers. I'm Andrew, and this is
Darcy Walsh.
We decided to start up a East Coast of Canada music podcast covering lots of things. We'll get into that a little bit later, but first, Darcy, why don't you tell us about you and why you love music?
Yeah, so as we were growing up, there was always music around the house, and we always had instruments around the house. There's always musicians around, either family or friends. And Pictou County is quite a talented community too, so there's always plenty of people performing in and around town. As I grew up, I guess I had a few little entrepreneurship things as a teenager and into my early adulthood that were music centric, and managed a couple record stores in my early career outside of school. So it was it's always something that I've been into, as I know, same with yourself. Don't really play any instruments to date, but I was always really into the backstory behind the music and the musicians themselves. And I get a little bit of a collector mentality with some of my other personal hobbies. So I have quite an extensive collection of albums here as well. I like to get into some of the details and the connections between the bands. So over COVID, got into podcasts a little bit, and you were involved a little bit in the original formation of the local Jam Sessions podcast. And then
Yeah, with the jam sessions, they were looking for they posted online, they're looking for a name for a podcast, and it was Jeff and Mike. So I thought, what about playing with that? So I was kind of playing around and figured jam sessions, and then came up with the Gem of the Holograms logo and got my brother-in-law to draft that image up. And
yeah, and ended up being their first guest.
yeah,
The
so
highest downloaded episodes, because it restarts there when people listen to new ones.
oh, perfect. That's
Yeah,
why. It's not because it's
yeah,
me.
keep it very high up in the stats.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they were looking for some help when Mike was backing off for a little rest from the podcast. So I did that for a little bit, and I realized that I really like this. So there was a few different things I wanted to try, and took some social media courses in the fall there. Uh, Shout out to Chris Lewis if this happens to get to him at any point. I know you took similar course through him there a couple of years ago yourself.
Yep.
Very knowledgeable person, very helpful information to have. So as I get into all that a little bit more, I had a lot of different ideas percolating that didn't necessarily fit the format of the podcast I was working with. And I had some personal projects that I thought maybe I could incorporate into something in a similar format. So when it came to Nova Scotia Music Week, it ended up being you and I that went. We interviewed 11 different artists altogether.
Yeah.
Not counting the individual members that came. But yeah, that was, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but it's just, there's such an infinite amount of content available in our region. I knew that there was a lot, and I always knew there was a lot, but just to see so much and to see such a supportive community. I know you and I had the conversation during some of the interviews, and offside the conversations we had with some of the people that were around. Everyone was so supportive of each other. It just had a really positive energy. And you and I had some side conversations about some of the ideas I had and some things you'd like to do, and that birthed this podcast here.
Yeah, and I think that weekend we kind of expected to do a couple interviews and hang around and stuff and take everything in. And I realized after that weekend that next time we bring more snacks and a thermos full of tea and a jug of water, because we didn't really stop for the weekend. So
yeah, I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of downtime there, so I could take in some of the events and catch a couple of performances. But there was definitely a lot more I would have liked to have seen.
yeah.
And at that time, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but it seemed like COVID was kind of pulling back, and things were reopening a little bit. So just before we had gone to the music week, I got out to the Seahorse to see Like a Motorcycle with Hello Delaware. and that was and Book Buddies, which was a really good show. And I was very excited to get out, and I was really excited that there was a lot of upcoming performances announced. But here we are at the end of the calendar year, and everything's canceling, and people are crawling back into their homes.
Yeah, let's circle back to that aspect of the whole thing there in a minute. There,
Yeah, for sure.
but
It's definitely a good time for a podcast.
yeah. So I grew up in the same house as Darcy. I was the favorite of two sons in the house, and but like he said, we there's always music around the house. There's always music available. I listened to Metallica for the first time. Master of Puppets was a cassette tape in our father's car. He had Cheap Trick in there. Nirvana Nevermind. My dad introduced me to that. Yeah, all that music was Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. Like everything I kind of grew up on. It was all music from our father. And then
Two of those original cassettes of his are now sitting on the shelf behind me as of this morning.
and I have two here in a box, so we're
There you go.
secretly stealing.
Even. Yeah.
So yeah, I always grew up with music, and our dad was a big influence on our music taste, I feel, growing up. And then when I kind of started listening to my own stuff, I got into Beastie Boys and stuff more when I was a teen. And then Darcy, my brother, he, when you were working at the music store and you had the 24 CD changer in your room, and that's what got me into like Led Zeppelin and Soundgarden and stuff. That was more your influence. And then I was still kind of on the Guns N' Roses, Nirvana train more so. So we kind of led our rock influence from the 80s into the grunge and alternative era. And we kind of took separate paths through that, but kind of they all married up at the end of it anyway. So
I think some of it leaned towards having side-by-side bedrooms, that if I was buying a new album, I would not buy an album that you were buying or that Dad would buy or that my close friends had. I'd buy an album that I couldn't otherwise listen to because we didn't live in a digital world that we have today.
Yeah.
So I started leaning towards, I wouldn't even say obscure. Most of it would be mainstream, or how else would I even have heard of it? But I think as I got older, that pushed me a little further into interest into some of the independent stuff. And I always did like scenes. I was always curious about the formation and life cycle of different music scenes. So it's nice to see that Halifax has a healthy scene, despite the fact that we don't have a lot of opportunities for them to be showcasing.
A behind the scenes scene right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But as part of this podcast, I'd like to explore a little bit further outside of Halifax. One of the things with the previous podcast work was we kind of were framed around Pictou County and then started to reach outside a little bit. But a member of the East Coast Music Association now as well, from signing up with Music Nova Scotia and participating in that festival. So I see all the membership information. I see all the different artists that are available, and hopefully we come up with a good process to process news through this channel a little bit, so that can utilize some of that information and hopefully get a little bit exposure to our hopeful audience in the future here.
Yeah, we'll be telling each other news, and everyone will listen.
And we'll try to get a little bit of a chat format going, introduce each other to a few things instead of just having casual phone calls. Maybe it's information that we can share with a slightly wider audience and see if anything is popular enough that it's worth doing more of these.
Yeah. So yeah, we both grew up with our own kind of music scenes, and I started playing guitar 15 years old, maybe. Played for a few years until I had to get an adult job when I was older, and that kind of fell by the wayside for about 10 years. But then I picked it up again about 6 years ago, I guess. Geez, 6 years ago. Yeah, so I started playing more and started doing a little guitar repair business in Pictou County, and that picked up pretty good until I moved away. And got to play Green Jello on stage and played with Dinosaur Neil in New Glasgow. We did some shows, and that's right when COVID came in. I was with the band for about 6 months before everything got shut down. So
yeah.
But then fast forward to podcasting. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have another one, a Seinfeld podcast that I have. So when we did the Music Week together. We decided we wanted to do this, and our initial idea was to kind of talk about the emerging music scene in a post-COVID situation. And then the numbers jumped back up, and everything got shut down again before the new year, and we kind of
Yeah,
stalled out a bit. And but we're figuring the new year. We're actually between Christmas and New Year's right now, but this will kind of be our thing to start off 2022. Will be this podcast, and we're gonna. Well, when you're listening, it's obviously out there. But for us, we're gonna try to get it there next week, and then start promoting it and see what we can do with it.
and hopefully as COVID dies off again and things start to reopen again, maybe we can follow a little bit of the new resurgence, and if not, we can explore what's happening in its void.
Yeah, and there is lots of music being made still. We met some of the musicians we did meet at the music week. There's really good stuff out there, and really interesting people. So we'll also like to get some of those people back and
Yes,
do
for
some
sure.
interviews. And we're set up to do phone interviews or in-person interviews, and depending on how everything goes, and we can showcase some of their music.
And one interesting thing, just I was thinking about it at the last couple of days as we were talking about the format would have to change a little bit because our original concept didn't lend itself so well to today's time frame. But with the New Year's shows being canceled, there's been a whole wave of cancellations with our numbers speaking. But there's also been a lot of people that have quickly adjusted this time that have live streaming options available. I mean, by the time anyone listens to this, it will have already happened because they're New Year's Eve shows that I'm specifically referencing. But it's just nice to see that people are utilizing the technology this wave around, that some lessons were learned from the initial lockdowns. And
yeah, initially people tried the live stream and it never worked. Something would fail, and but now it seems to be, it's locked down. So people are like, okay, let's do that live stream thing that we have figured out already. So
yeah, and like last night, I actually was here in my apartment. I was able to watch the live premiere of the Cancer Bats doing acoustic performances of some of their songs. That was awesome to be able to just sit in my living room and catch that, because I don't have the opportunity to go out and see them at a show.
yeah,
Now, like, that's a band that definitely will play Halifax when they do a tour, a proper tour, but who knows if that's going to be in 2 months or 3 years. We have no idea. So it's just nice to have the option to still catch them. Back in the summer, I had caught part of the Making Waves Festival. I got to watch a live stream of Mono Whales and the Town Heroes. And that was a really good one too. But I do remember noting at the time, because of COVID and because of the weather that particular day, things got delayed and nobody knew. It wasn't worth driving up to go to a show because it's like a 3.5 hour drive from here. But it was nice to have the option to watch it online. I'd like to see more people taking advantage of those things.
yeah. I see lots of people doing them, and they're not getting a huge audience. But I think it's because people think live stream is not going to be good. But it's smaller bands have this option now, and it is good now. So people really should be taking that stuff in.
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity for it there too. And I mean, even the podcast itself, like when we first started talking about ideas for this, I did a little bit of dive and looking to see what else was out there. And I was already aware of some because I was involved a little bit with one and I listened to podcasts, but I started with like Danko Jones because that's something I already followed. His podcast isn't updated as often lately.
No,
Alan Cross is somebody, is a media personality out in Ontario that I've been following for years. He has a good podcast that I listen to. But now that we were focusing on the East Coast, I started realizing that there's quite a few down here. I sent you one the other day there too. David Miles was doing one, the Miles from Home podcast. There's the Tideline podcast Tara Thornton's doing, which is a lot of the same bands that we were meeting. It seems like she's in with that same scene. She was in a band herself that I assume was playing in that Halifax music scene with the same circles.
and that one's not just music based though. That kind of is
that's like an arts and culture type.
So I saw a
podcast.
Steve Murphy interview on there, and
yeah, exactly. So it's nice to see the diversity. And Dana from Hello Delaware had one during the initial year of the COVID lockdowns and everything, she had the This Is Fine podcast, which I went back and listened to some of that there as well. So it's nice to see that all the content's out there, but even as a fan and somebody who is willing to put the time in to explore that stuff, I'm unaware of some of it myself. So the chat format of a podcast would lend itself well to introducing stuff. And if we can get anyone listening to it, hopefully we can get a couple guests on. Maybe they can provide some recommendations or updates on what they're doing themselves.
Yeah, so that's kind of our goal, is just to give another avenue for people to find out what's going on locally and kind of encourage people to get out there once we can go to shows again and see the shows or see the live streams or even support the local bands on Bandcamp. Just kind of be aware of what's out there and what good music we do have in just a small area, really, as East Coast. But the talent to person ratio is quite large. So
yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, we have an Instagram page started up and kind of using that to promote local musicians and stuff. And for the podcast, we're going to put a Discord together, and we have it together, but we're looking at ideas how we can utilize that. Maybe have like a bulletin board in there for your shows and whatnot.
And this podcast is going to be put together initially, at least through the Anchor FM Spotify. So we'll be able to incorporate some music. So with this initial one, I'll probably just throw a few songs at the end, give you an idea of some of the content we'd like to be covering, and YouTube channel as well.
We're attempting video. If you're watching video, yay, we figured it out. And if you're not watching video, we'll try again next week. I don't think this is going to be like a bi-weekly thing for us too. We're not going to do it every week as much as there is out there. I don't know if there's enough for us to talk every single week on it, but
yeah, there's the content, but it'll be the who's listening versus how much effort is it to pull together these episodes.
Yeah, if we had 1,000 downloads on the first one, we'll definitely go weekly, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, not likely. Has there been anything since we did the music week that spun out of that as far as awareness for you that you've been following? Like Pillow Fight had a new song that came out just shortly after their episode aired.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from that, I found Chudy Harris was really interesting to talk to, and Maddie Grace and Pillow Fight were really the big take homes for me that I've been continuing to pay attention to.
Yeah, I actually have the Cluttered vinyl release on order. I'm just waiting for it to show up in the mail any day.
Yeah, I want to get that too. Like, that EP is fantastic, and the Pillow Fight stuff, I've been following that, and yeah, it's great music.
Yeah, no, really good. Good Dear Good as well. I saw some stuff through our Instagram account when I was following some of that over the holidays. I saw Tim Hatcher doing some new stuff. He's got some new demos ready for the band. And I know that they had a show coming up in the city in February. So hopefully we get things back under control and that doesn't have to be canceled or postponed. It'd be exciting to hear more from them.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that we were looking forward to there just kind of didn't happen. So
yeah, I know it's a sin. That's what like there's quite a few shows that I was kind of geared up right when things started to lock down. I had done an interview with Mike from Contrive Turk to help promote a little series of shows that they were going to do. It was like a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night show, and it was so close with the restrictions. The Thursday one went ahead, but the Friday and Saturdays were canceled. So that was a sin. But I see also through their Instagram that they're jamming and recording some stuff. So hopefully we got some new tunes coming from them in the new year. That's another exciting one to follow. Pictou County boys, essentially. That's something else to really look forward to. And there were so many bands that we didn't get to, and a lot of nice people. Everyone that we met was so nice to us that I'd like to follow up with quite a few of them. But I'd like to explore a little bit outside of our province even, because there's so many people on this coast that you don't really hear about unless you're from here.
Yeah, and that event was Nova Scotia alone, and the huge amount of talent there. Was 88 different artists participated
Something
in
that? Yeah,
we got to like a tenth of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you incorporate Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland, there's so much out there we can branch out to. But if anyone does want to be mentioned or want to be in our scope, they can hit us up on Instagram, send us a DM on Instagram, or email at eastcoastdnapodcast@gmail.com, and we'll start the conversation there too.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to hear from anybody. And if you would like to be on, we can make arrangements there, lots of options. Or if you just have a news item or a concert, a release coming up or something you'd like us to plug for you, we'd be more than happy to do that as well.
And in our show notes too, there's going to be a link to leave a voicemail to feature through Anchor. So we're not as techie as it sounds by saying it, but you can click on the link there and leave a voicemail for us as well. If you want something advertised on a show, we can just drop your recording right in there.
Yeah, it'll be fluid for the first little while until we nail down all the processes, see what works and what doesn't. But as we develop the format, anyone that happens to be listening that would like to contribute some ideas or feedback or anything you want included, just let us know. We're all ears.
So yeah, this episode here was more of our intro, kind of telling you what our plan was, where we think we're going to go with it, and our plans will probably change 10 times in the next couple months as we see what works and what doesn't work. But thank you everyone for listening. Check us out on Instagram. Follow us there.
Yeah, and continue listening. We should have a few songs tagged on the end of here, and we'll try to incorporate them a little smoother in future episodes.
Yes. Thanks for listening, and everyone have a good day, night, morning, whenever you're listening. Goodbye now.
Until next time.